Thanks, Katie. Sorry about that. Right, so just for the purpose of the recording, I'm Clara Finnemore and I'm co-chair of the ARLIS Serials Committee, and I'm hosting this morning with my co-chair, Lexi Frost. So if you could please remain muted and with your cameras off for this training session this morning, that would be great. Obviously, if you're staying for the interactive session, then we're all going to get to have our cameras on and our mics on and share some thoughts. Captions have been enabled, so if you would like to see captions, then you can set that on the bottom, on your bottom menu. And so just to confirm, we're recording now and we're recording until the end of the training session, but the Q&A will not be recorded and the interactive session later on will not be recorded. Okay, so I'd just like to give you a brief introduction to ARLIS for anyone who doesn't already know who we are. So we are the Arts Library Society. We are the professional organisation for people involved in providing library and information services and documenting resources in the visual arts. ARLIS UK&I supports the art library profession by fostering engagement and understanding of the contribution of art libraries and librarians in the museums and education sectors and beyond. We host events, visits, talks and conferences, and we facilitate academic discourse through the publication of the Art Libraries Journal. So do consider joining if you're not already a member. Membership is available to individuals and institutions, so you could still join even if you're not in an art-specific institution at the moment. Membership will allow you to network with fellow professionals and join one of our groups or committees to get actively involved in the work that we do. Membership also gains you eligibility to apply for research and travel grants, and individual membership entitles you to a subsidised rate for the Art Libraries Journal. So all of this information and more is on our website, so do take a look. And membership runs with the calendar year, so if you did decide to join now, it's quite a good time. So we have several committees as part of our list who are organising events, so do keep an eye out for other things coming up, and also announcements about the annual conference, which is going to be held in the summer in Norwich this year. So just briefly about the Serials Committee, Lexi and I formed the committee last year specifically to support those working with serials. We basically realised we had quite a lot of questions about how to look after our collections and thought maybe we could connect with more colleagues and help each other out. So we spoke to lots of lovely people during our launch events, and I'm hoping that some of you are here. I know already that one is So a lot of people that we spoke to said they were not confident about serials cataloguing, and it made it the perfect topic for this first event that we're running. So we're really pleased to be collaborating with the ARLIS Cataloguing and Classification Committee to bring this to you today. So I'm now very nearly ready to hand over to Lluis, who is joining us from the Museum of London to present on serials cataloguing. Lluis will present for around 40 minutes and then we'll have around 15 minutes of Q&A. So please do put your questions in the chat as we go, and then we'll pick them up at the end. Okay, so that's all from me for now. So over to you, Lluis. I'm going to stop sharing.
Good morning, everyone. And thanks, Clara, for the introduction. So my name is Lluis. I'm the librarian at the Museum of London, and I've been in libraries for over 15 years, usually working in museums and heritage-related collections. A couple of my roles had to do with serials management, so I was very pleased to be invited to talk to you about serials cataloging for this presentation today. So I'm gonna share my screen, and I've got a presentation for you. So if I could just confirm that you can see the right view of the presentation.
Yeah, we can.
Excellent, thanks, Clara. So as I mentioned, I've got a presentation for you. I think it will be around 40 minutes, and then we should have some time for questions. And this is what I would like to cover during the presentation. So we're going to look at cataloging serials. I'm going to do this using a template. And then I'm going to walk through those fields that I consider important when doing serials cataloging. We will also look at creating predictions, and that includes enumeration, patterns, and also a checking screen. We will also have time to look at a couple of oddities, and by oddities I mean serials that might not be that straightforward, identify the serials, and we might hesitate on how to catalog them. I think we should have some time also for serials promotion, just to discuss a couple of ideas on how to make your serials and periodicals a bit more relevant to your patrons. And again, we should have some time for a Q&A at the end. So, cataloging serials in a nutshell, I'm going to be talking about specific data for fixed fields, specific variable fields, which is where we're going to spend a bit more time. Just to remind everyone that standard either Anglo-American cataloging rules 2 or RDA rules will apply. So it might require that you are familiar with those cataloging rules. And then also we will have a slide on recording holdings, which might be a bit different from one management system to another one. Now, this is a good moment to mention that the screenshots I'm going to be showing are of my own library management system, which is EOS Web. But of course, the images might be different depending on the system that you are currently using in your library. So fixed fields. Fixed fields are probably, or at least I think it's not just a personal opinion, are quite the trickiest part of a bibliographical record, maybe the less loved. And what I'd say that with serials cataloging, you need to pay attention to basically 3 areas, or I would recommend that you pay attention to 3 areas. The leader, which you would need a bibliographical level of S for serials on that box. And again, keep in mind that this might look different on your own management system, yeah? But that's the second image here, the leader elements. And basically what you need is that S there to just let the system know that the record is actually for a serial. Now, with the location 008, which is the image on the left, you might want to spend a bit more time there. There's usually a lot of options, a lot of boxes that you could be working towards. But personally, I would say that you need at least like the next 3 or 4 positions completed. The first one, the type of date, and basically you need a current or a ceased date, and this is where you're going to highlight the fact that that publication is still current, or actually it has ceased publication. If it's still current, you would only need 1 date, the beginning of the publication date. If it has ceased, then you'll complete both dates there on those 2 boxes. Also, you might want to complete the information for the frequency and the regularity and so forth, but keep in mind that all being good, this information will also be on the bibliographical record, yeah, on the variable fields. Lastly, if you are dealing with an electronic resource like an e-journal, remember that you will have to create an entry for the fixed fields 6 and 7, 006, 007, in order to highlight that that record is for an electronic resource. Now, if you wanted to find out more about the data that goes into fixed fields or actually variable fields, as we will see later, most library management systems, when you are on the cataloging screen, will offer you a way of linking with the relevant databases where you can find out more information about the data that goes into those locations. Yeah, in my case, as you can see on the image, I've got these 3 little logos. So if I click at the RDA, it takes me to the RDA toolkit, or if I click at the MARC light blue logo, it takes me to the Library of Congress list of MARC fields. Yeah, so I can always refer back to the type of data that is expected on that location. So now, this is the main slide for the cataloging serials, so the variable fields, and this is where we can actually spend a bit more time and have a bit more fun also cataloging that resource. Yeah, so when I do cataloging from scratch, I usually have my templates, and this is the one that I have for serials. And on my templates, what I normally do is just have all the fields that I think I will need for a good record, even those that I might not always use. So for example, on this image here, you can see that I've got all the RDA new fields already preset on the template, so I don't forget about them. And then I might delete, for example, the still image, the second 336, if I don't need that one. So the amount of fields that you are in your template is totally up to your own practice. You can have more or less, but it helps me to remind myself of that the information I should be looking for when I've got the resource in front of me. So that's my template. And then what I'll do, I will be going through those fields that I highlight as unique or more important to serials. And I'm going to give you a bit of information about all of them. So the first one is quite straightforward and is the 022 for the ISSN. Not much to mention about this one, very straightforward. On a monograph record, you would have the 020 for the ISBN. On serials, 022 for the ISSN, which should be easily accessible to you from the publication. Now, the next one along is 310, current frequency. Just a note, obviously there's a lot more fields in between 22 and 310. The title, the publication details, the format of the publication where we would introduce volume numbers or illustrations, etc. But those ones are quite standard with book cataloging. So I'm gonna give for granted that we are familiar with those ones. So I'm jumping onto 310, and that's where you would record the current frequency of that publication. Yeah, normally again that should be accessible from the publication, or if it's an online resource, usually there is a section on the web page where it tells you how frequently that publication is published. Next one along, 321, format frequency. Just a note to say that this is a repeatable field. So if the publication has changed frequency along its life, it's actually worth repeating that field and recording that with as much detail as possible. This might sound like we are investing a lot of time, but remember that we are trying to help our readers to understand the publication they've got in front of them, the publication that they need. Bibliographical references in publications might have changed or might refer to a different frequency to what is the current one. So it's worth spending some time highlighting all these changes that the publication has gone through. Yeah, usually the format for these fields is very straightforward. You could say that it's monthly between 1973 and 1984, and then it goes on to annual, etc. So you just create like that list of different frequencies. The next field, 362, so dates of publication. In here, you've got a chance to include more specific data to the dates that you would have a standard practice on a subfield C on the 300 field, yeah, the dates of publication. Whereas in there, you might have just the publication date and the end of publication date. In the 362, you can actually expand a bit. If it's a current publication that is still in print, you could say that the publication begins with volume 1 in 1980. If it's a publication that has since then ceased, then you can have the complete set of volumes there. You could say that it started with volume 1 in 1970 and it finished with volume 26 in 1996. So you've got a chance to expand on that information. Again, just making the life of the reader a bit easier. Numbering peculiarities go into 515. And this is one that is totally up to you how much detail you want to put into, but it's worth recording any information that might confuse the library catalog user. I can think of two examples. One of them is an error on printing. So sometimes you might come across journals that have the wrong volume printed on the cover, for example, and then you can just add a note saying volume 65 printed as 66. But also long-standing publications that have gone through different series, they might change numbering between one series or the next one, or the opposite. They actually they might continue the issuing numbering from one series into the next one. So you might actually want to express that there as well. Next field, 588, source of description. This is the one where I think the librarian has a chance to cover their backs and say, this is where you actually record that the information on that record was taken from a given volume. Yeah. So if any of that information changes after that volume, the reader sees that the discrepancy is because of when that record was created. And in here, you can just say description taken from volume number 8, 1980, etc. It's totally up to you, but it is worth recording the fact that the information on the record is from a very specific issue. Now, subject headings. We all know how important these fields are, and they are also important for serials cataloging. And I would highlight the fact that we might be using any of the subject headings fields from 600, 610, 650, 651. And this really depends on the topic of the publication, as you know, but it's worth remembering that, for instance, we might have journals dedicated to specific artists. So a 600 field might be used here for a journal dedicated to Picasso or Virginia Woolf or Oscar Wilde. The field 610, so for an institution or a corporate body, might be quite handy when we are cataloging publications about a given institution. So we might have the transactions of the British Museum. So the British Museum in this case would be both, would have a statement of responsibility on a 110 field, but also it could be also introduced as the subject of that publication in a 610. Then obviously the more usual 650, 651, where we would enter the relevant subject headings to do with topics or geographical places. And, you know, examples could be multiple here. So we could have journals dedicated to the archaeology of London, the history of London, that would be on a 651, etc. Now, the thing to remember about subject headings when serials cataloging is that you must have a free floating subdivision pipe V periodicals at the end of those subject headings. Yeah, this is not only best practice, but also if you think about it, an experienced library catalog user might see by using that free floating subdivision, might see an extra clue to understand that that record is for an ongoing publication like a journal or a magazine, etc., rather than a monograph. Yeah, so we would not use this free floating subdivision for a monograph. Therefore, we use it for serials just to highlight that it is a periodical publication. Now, next fields 780, which goes nicely along with 785, preceding entry and succeeding entry. In here, again, it's totally up to you how far you go into the amount of information that you record on these fields, but I quite like them. I think that they give us a chance to create almost, if you think about like a family tree of a given publication. So on the preceding entry, you can record the previous name of that publication and then a later name on the succeeding entry on the 785. And that might be enough, but consider also exploring the capabilities of your cataloging model in the management system, because if you explore what the indicators allow you to do with those fields, yeah, the indicators that would be the 2 digits that fall between the field number and the data on that field, some LMSs might allow you to explain, for example, that a publication has merged with another one and has created, therefore, a new title, or the opposite, that a publication actually has split and has created has gone from 1 into 2. So the indicators might allow you to play with these possibilities. But if that's not the case, or if what's happened to that publication is not expressed properly with just using the indicators, you can always add a 500 field, a note field, where you would actually just explain in plain words what has happened to that publication. For example, you can say that, you know, this publication has merged with another one to create this one from this year, etc. So you've got that option to explain further. This idea of creating a family tree for a publication, actually, it's quite handy when you're dealing with historical publications like magazines, historical historical magazines, historical newspapers. I'm thinking maybe examples from the Victorian period that move into the 20th century. And as you look into that combination of previous titles and later titles, you realize that that same publication has been constantly merging with others to create a new one, or actually splitting sections, etc. So it is quite handy for anyone doing research on, for instance, fashion magazines. That's one of the examples I can think about. Lastly, we've got field 856. And that's the one that you would use for electronic resources, yeah? And you would want to record a couple of aspects here. One, obviously, the hyperlink to the web page where that publication is based, but also you've got a chance to record, to give the reader that extra bit of information about the length of the publication that is actually available to them. So 2 examples here. If the journal that you are cataloging, the electronic access you get from JSTOR, remember that JSTOR comes with a moving wall, which is usually quite a few years. So you might want to have a note on the 856 field explaining, not necessarily about the moving wall, because that's a bit of a complex concept, but you want to give your reader information about how much of the publication is accessible. The other example would be if you've got direct access to an electronic journal directly from the publisher, but if they've never had a chance to actually digitize the back issues, then you might want to add a note to the reader saying that that link only gives you access from volume 7, 1996 onwards. Yeah. So again, we're trying to make the experience of the library user as complete as possible. So the next slide, I'm just showing you very quickly an example of what I consider is a finished record. And you can see some of the, if not most of the fields I've just covered. And this is how the same record looks on the library catalog. And again, we've gone the extra mile, adding as much information as possible, and the reader has a chance to see not only the bibliographical details, but also the library holdings, and also that hyperlink to the electronic version of the journal. So the last thing that I want to mention on the cataloging serials side of the presentation is recording holdings. And recording holdings might be different from one LMS to another one, but also between a publication that is current, that you're still receiving, that is still in print, or a publication that has actually ceased, or that you don't no longer subscribe to. And that's the case for the first image here on the left. So that's a publication that is no longer arriving to my library. Therefore, the holding statement right at the bottom of that image just includes a very straightforward list of those volumes that I've got in the library. No complexity whatsoever, just the list. Now, with an example of a current publication that we still subscribe to, there's a bit more information there. So as you can see, I've got a holding statement, which tells the reader when our run starts, and that's volume 4, 1928. It also mentions the latest issue that has arrived, but also it gives you a snapshot of the last 6 issues received. So you can tell that we've got a complete set there, at least in the last 6 months. Now, you also have an opportunity to have a note, and that's where personally I list the missing issues that might not be in the library. And again, that's a way of letting the reader know that yes, we've got this publication, but sadly we're missing issues X, Y, or Z that would go onto that note there. Now, the other thing to mention here, depending on your LMS, if you have officially claimed any of the issues because they never arrived, the holdings might reflect that. And it might say, for example, that number 713 has been claimed. And that shows that, yes, it's not in the library, but actually the librarian is on top of it and is trying to find that copy to complete that gap in the sequence. Yeah. Right, so that's holdings. And we are moving into something a bit more complex, which is creating predictions. I say complex, but actually I also quite enjoy it because it makes, it's a bit of a challenge, but it's one of those challenges that you enjoy once in a while. Creating predictions will be very, very different if you don't have a serials model. And I'm aware that some libraries don't have a serials model on their LMS. So I hope that by showing you how that works, it might inspire you to request that maybe that's added on your package. And what we are looking at is enumeration, patterns, and then the possibility of having a checking-in screen. So enumerations, this is where I'm gonna, so we've left cataloging the bibliographical details aside, and now we are moving more into the serials management aspect, yeah? So by creating an enumeration, what we are doing is letting the management system know when to expect those, the next issues, and also how the numbering will be reflected on those predictions that we will create. So in this first example, it's quite a straightforward one. It's an annual publication, so comes once a year. And I've preset the predictions to have the term volume, that the number will be in Arabic rather than Roman numbers, and that the number will be continuous. So it will be just a natural number that started with 1 and carried on, etc. Yeah. Now, things can get a bit more complex when dealing with periodicals and journals. For example, this publication on the second image is a quarterly publication, so it's printed 4 times a year. So it requires a volume number, but also an issue number, as you can see on the second line here at the bottom. Both of them, the numbers will be in Arabic, but the issue number restarts every 4 issues. And that makes sense, right? So if it's quarterly, it's published 4 times a year, and then that's repeated on the next year. So to show you even a more complex example, I've got this magazine here, Current Archaeology, which probably due to historical reasons, it actually comes with 4 sets of data. So it comes with a date, as many more publications, which could be a month or could be a season, etc., and a year. But also it comes with a volume number, which in this case is in actually Roman numbers, and it's continuous. It comes with a number, which actually it's only being a monthly publication, it's 12 numbers a year, not necessarily January to December, as you can see from the picture on the top. It's a publication that follows the financial year. So issue number 12, actually it's March, and then number 1 will be April. Then on top of that, there is also a continuous ongoing issue number, which probably has started with number 1 back in the day. So this is like 3 layers of information that you are creating plus the date, and that can actually make your brain hurt a bit, but it's trial and error, and it's actually quite fulfilling when you actually get there. So going back to the image at the top, you can see here the information that I've been trying to create on the library management system. Yeah, you can see the volume number in Roman numbers, which is 33, the month number, number 12, the date, and also on top of that, the issue number. Now, usually enumeration doesn't get more complex than this. I think that this is one of the examples where you've got like so much going on. Okay, so dates aside, something else I would like to bring attention to. So my library management system on this screen allows me to decide when to claim for a missing issue. And on the annual publication on the left, I'm being a bit generous because, of course, annual publications might not be published on a very specific date. So I'm giving myself 90 days before that issue goes on to a claim report. The other 2, because one is quarterly and the other one is monthly, I'm only giving myself 15 days before I start claiming those issues. Yeah, and this is to avoid missing claim periods, which is normally like what, 3 months. After that, the publisher might no longer be able to supply a replacement. So it's really important that you know and you report when to start adding claims onto your claim report. And of course, if you've got the time to just check that claim report and chase publishers. Right, this is enumeration. The next bit along is the pattern. And the pattern starts with us selecting which issue will be the next one. Yeah, so if it's a brand new publication that you don't have in the library, then the safest bet is just to select the next issue being published as the first one to expect. And as you can see on the examples here, because I already have the enumeration. The only thing I need to tell the management system is the number of the next one I'm going to expect. So, for example, on the second image is issue 717, which I'm expecting on like around mid-February, and the information on the publication will be March 2023. Okay, now quite handily as well, at the bottom of the images, what I've got is a breakdown of the calendar months. And the months in green mean that I should be getting an issue on that month. The one in red is the next one. So at all times, I know when the next one will be. And then with the example on the right-hand side, actually, I've managed to create an enumeration and a pattern that tells the system not to expect any issues in July and in August. And here are highlighted in yellow. Yeah. So all this, you have to enter that data. And that's where the fun is, right? Is trying to understand with a publication in front of you how to reflect that data on the management system. So for all this to make sense, I've got an example of a real publication. So that's the British Art Journal. This is the enumeration I created. So it comes with a volume and a number. It's published 3 times a year. I'm going to claim it after 15 days of not having received it. This is the pattern. So volume number, the date, and then this calendar where you can see that the next one that I'm expecting is February, but I should not be getting any more copies until May and November. If all this works, then the magic happens in the checking screen. Yeah, so I know it's a bit of a busy image, but that's where all the information that you need to be on top of your serials is. So if the enumeration has worked well, if the pattern was correct, then you get automatically, the system produces this very long list of predictions. And then the idea is that the next time that you get a copy of that publication on the post, you double check that what's printed on it and your prediction matches. If it does, very straightforward. In my case, I just click at that little box with the green tick, and that checks it in, and I don't have to do anything else. But if there are any discrepancies, I should be exploring. Is it with a publisher? Is it a mistake? Or maybe has the frequency changed since the last volume? Explore that path. Potentially the problem will be with the enumeration or the pattern. Therefore, I just need to go back 1 step or 2 steps. And again, trial and error, play around with the options until save them. And then the predictions will automatically be updated until those predictions actually match what's printed on my journal. So again, this could go either way. It would go very straightforward and be lots of fun, or it could actually give you some headache, but still be quite fun. There is an aspect of like challenging yourself when creating predictions. Right. Next section in the presentation is about oddities. And by oddities, what I mean is serials that might not look like one, or publications that we don't really know in which family they fall. And this is when local practices might come into place. So what I'm gonna use as examples are my own local practices from my current job and previous positions as well. But it might be worth checking with your own institutions. What's your policy? Or actually you might not have one and you might just decide to start your own policy on oddities, let's call them from today. The main one that I want to talk about is monographing series. And the example I'm using is the London Record Society publications. Yeah, this society publishes annual volumes, and all the volumes are dedicated to one specific primary source, usually a manuscript that is held in a library collection. So technically, they publish different topics, yeah, but the common theme of the publication is academic research on primary sources. Therefore, what I've decided to do is to have a record for the London Record Society publications as a serial. As you can see here, left hand is the the template, and right-hand side is how it looks in the library catalog. And it has all the bits and bobs here as well. Yeah, so it has the current issues, it has a note, it has the last issue that was received, etc., plus all the bibliographical details. Note that I've included a line letting the reader know, the library user know, that these volumes are also cataloged individually. Therefore, they know that they can go back to the library catalog and find specific records for the specific volumes. And this is one example, yeah? So the volumes on the picture, the blue ones, that's how the publication looks like. And the example of the record is for a specific volume. So why do I do that? Well, if you think about it, by creating a record for the monograph, you actually have a really good chance of helping discovery and browsability by having all those keywords specific to that primary source that would not be on the periodical serial. Yeah, so the periodical serial is very straightforward. It talks about historical resources about the City of London, but actually on this record, I've got a chance to actually go into detail about that specific record. And I think that actually that's quite a step forward towards browsability and discovery of resources. So that's one oddity. We've got two more. Single copies. Single copies are one of my long-standing obsessions. And I absolutely despise finding single copies of journals within monographs. Yeah, I know it happens. Sometimes there's no other way around it. But what I personally do is I make sure that there is a serial record for that publication. So there's no monograph record, it's just a single record for that publication. I make sure that the location is updated from a class mark to the location for periodicals. And yes, it might look a bit odd, like on the picture, that there's a single issue living in between like longer runs, but I think I sleep much, much better if every time I remove a single copy from a monograph from the open shelves onto the periodicals library. Yeah, so that's just my approach. The other one, it's a bit more up for discussion, and is auction catalogues. So auction catalogues are heavily collected by art and history and archaeology libraries, museum libraries, etc. But I think we will all agree that we don't give them that much love. There's a lot of them, they're very expensive, they take a lot of space, and they very, very rarely make it into the library catalog unless it's a specific sale from like someone's collection, like the Elton John collection that is so important and so rich that actually it's worth cataloging as almost as a monograph, right? But let's keep in mind that auction houses will have ongoing standard regular sales that might happen maybe once or twice a year, every year. And I'm thinking sales about antiques, Asian art, European furniture, Americana, etc. Those ones which are ongoing and not one-offs, they normally have codes within the volumes that link them. And that makes them an ideal candidate to be cataloged as serials. Yeah. So imagine that you are a library that specializes in, I don't know, furniture, let's say. If you were to be able to catalog, to have a serials record for the Bonham's European furniture sale that happens twice a year, every year, that means that your library users would actually be able to find that record and know that you've got that as an ongoing resource. Yeah. So I think we've got some time for serials promotion, and these are either ideas that I use at work or things I've seen happening in other places. Yeah, but I thought that I would cover or give you these examples really at the back of the exercise of spending quality time cataloging or recataloguing our journals. So once you've done that, you've got a chance to actually go one step further and promote them. So three areas: special searches, subject guides, and QR codes. So what do I mean with that? Special searches. So these are a couple of images from my own library catalog. What I've done, once I've audited and recatalogued all my periodicals collection, I've created a special search, which means that by clicking at one of those two buttons on the left-hand side within the red frame, the reader is taken to a complete list of periodicals. Not only that, but because we've got a big collection of periodicals about conservation, I have actually created a button just for that collection. So my colleagues in the conservation labs can click at that button and just get a selection of that material relevant to them. And that's the image that you've got on the right-hand side. Yeah. So from having to browse the complete library catalog with keywords that might take you into like a rabbit warren, then by having that search, which should be quite straightforward to set up on your library management system, you're actually isolating just the journals. And of course, that search can be combined by the reader with another keyword. So I could do the journals and periodicals button and then introduce keywords like textiles or London or oral histories, and just reduce the amount of returns that come onto the search. Now, the other idea is to add your journals into subject guides or reading lists or bibliographies, etc. Now, the only thing that you might want to consider is the periodicals might not show an image the same way that monographs, because they've got an ISBN, your LMS might pull the cover of the book from Google or such. Now, what I do, those journals that I want to put in a reading list or a bibliography, I attach a cover of their, an image of their cover, like Britannia you can see here. And that allows me for that publication to be used in visual aspects, like a slider or a carousel on the landing page. Yeah. So, for instance, I've got a subject guide / reading list on Roman London. So I've introduced Britannia as part of the selection of resources on that topic. And by having that picture attached to the record, it means I can actually use it in visual tools that are available to me, like the slider or a carousel, depending on what you call it. So I quite like that. Then lastly, I completely improvised a QR code for this publication in the collection. We personally, in our library, we don't have enough online journals to probably follow this path, but it's very, very easy to go online and find free websites where you can actually create QR codes, print them, and then either attach them to your current or latest journal display, like the picture on the left, or actually also quite handy, you can just attach them to the physical run of the publication. So if you are in a big library with lots of readers, and if one of those volumes is currently being used by someone else, your library patron knows that there's the alternative, the electronic version that might be available to them. And if they've got their phone, they just need to scan the QR code, and that goes straight into the publisher's website. So it could not be any easier. Obviously, you also have the alternative to create a QR code that takes you to the library catalog, but that's almost like adding an extra step onto reaching the online version. So these are all the tips that I want to share with you. One last slide with training resources or ideas for training resources. The first one, the main one, Ed Jones' book on RDA and serious cataloging. So I currently don't have a copy with me, but I've used it in the past in a couple of roles, and I do remember really enjoying reading it, being very approachable and very straightforward to apply onto your day-to-day cataloging. Note there is an expensive publication, as you can imagine, and also that there's a new edition in 2024. So maybe don't rush into buying a second-hand copy or a brand new copy of the 2013, which it's difficult to believe, but it's 10 years old now. And maybe just wait until next year until the new edition is published. Keep also in mind that RDA has evolved a lot in the last 10 years. So it's probably a really good idea to wait until 24 and get the very, very latest version of the RDA cataloging rules. While you wait for that book to be published, Library of Congress and Concert have cataloging checklists, which I've looked recently, and they are quite handy. And basically, they guide you through field by field, a bit like I did in the previous slides. But also keep in mind that even those are quite old, 2012. So be aware that things might have changed since. And something I do very often, I just go on to other libraries' own cataloging manuals, which are likely available online. I usually select well, I see what's out there, but I normally go for big university libraries, for example, that they have their own training material for their own staff available online, and see if I can gather best practices in the sector to apply to my own cataloging manual. So you've got those 3 ideas there, but I really, really strongly recommend Ed Jones' book. And that's the end of my presentation. I think I'm going to hand back to Clara, and thank you all for the time listening to me. I hope everything was clear, and I look forward to questions.